So my name is Karlijn. You already saw me. I'm a data science journalist at DataCamp, and previously I obtained master's degrees in information management, literature, and linguistics. Then I started off my professional career as a junior big data developer, so I have experience with Scala, Hadoop, and Spark. I love literature, languages, and data science, and also big data, of course, because I worked in it. And I also love to talk, so please stop me whenever you have any questions, but then keep it to the chat so that there is no interference. As I said, I work for DataCamp, and the focus is on learning by doing. So that's interactive learning for R, Python, and data science. And why I am so passionate about working for DataCamp is because, well, data science, like any other thing, is something that you only can learn by doing it and by really being actively involved in it. And that is also the opinion of many other learners that come to actually practice and learn with us at DataCamp. We have a lot of working professionals that come to study with us, but also just people that want to switch careers, or people that are just students and that they want to get the first feel with data science. And yeah, when you start thinking about data science and how you can learn Python for data science, you think on the one hand, yeah, one does not simply learn Python for data science. And there's also the question, can I actually learn Python for data science? And then there is this other voice in your head that says, let's just start. And I think that let's just start, that voice should be the one that is really prevailing once you really decide to take the step, because it's not going to be an easy road. You'll be faced with a lot of questions, with difficulties. And even though there are resources that really make it easy for you to start data science, you should still keep the motivation going. And in the next few slides, in the next half hour, I will try to make sure that I find ways for you to keep motivated and just to stay in touch with the community also, which is something that a lot of people forget when they start learning data science, or when they say that, yeah, I'm going to start learning data science and Python also. If you have absolutely no idea of what the data science industry is, and you have no clue of what data science is, I recommend these two useful links. The first one is an infographic that links back to the data science industry and the roles, and the battle of the data science Venn diagrams, which actually explains the field of data science and what you should do, what you should learn to actually get into it. Now, I know that you don't have access right now to the material, but I will share everything with you as soon as this webinar ends. So you'll be able to check all of the resources out yourself. You might think now, like, yeah, we should start by learning by doing, but in essence, it also is first that you have to find your learning style. And I really highly encourage you to also find the materials that work for you, and to keep also busy with the materials that work for you. I mean, if you don't learn anything by reading a book, then don't go and read books. I of course, highly recommend that you learn and read books, but if it doesn't work for you, I wouldn't recommend. Also for your motivation, just keep it highly motivated, and then you can start learning data science. The first step, is get good at statistics, mathematics, and machine learning. And you see some courses listed here. You might have also already seen this infographic. I'm well aware of that. But I just wanted to emphasize that it's really important to get the basics right. I myself come from a background of linguistics and literature. And it is really hard to get started with statistics and mathematics if you've never seen any of that in your education ever. So that is why I also listed some of the resources that I found helpful. And I also put Coursera here, the practical machine learning course. And you'll also know the machine learning course by Stanford, the one with Andrew. Maybe you know him, maybe you don't. But these are really courses that you should keep an eye on. So the useful links, I put some here. And what maybe comes as a surprise to many is that also things like linear algebra are in this like overview of resources. And a lot of people get put off by that, and they don't think, I mean, they think it's too hard for them, or that it isn't useful to get started with linear algebra when you get into data science. But I would highly recommend that you take a look at all of these resources that are listed here. And like I said, you have some courses here, you have some tutorials here, you have some books, but pick whatever works for you. Of course, we're talking about learning online. So if you also know any trainings that are in your neighborhood, you should definitely recommend. But I would recommend you to keep a focus on learning by doing. It's really important that you get immersed with it. And if you follow a class, don't just follow a class, but actively participate in it. And also afterwards, try to keep going further with the material that they gave you, and also apply what you have learned. Because it's well enough, like sources like Khan Academy, they give you a lot of theory and a lot of videos, and they give you a lot of good background that you'll need. But in the end, it's also about applying those stuff with Python. And there is where it might get difficult, especially if you haven't followed a single SciPy tutorial about linear algebra, for example. And then you get started with data science. It can really be very tough. And then the second step is learn to code, right? That's why we're here, to learn Python for data science. And this infographic is a very general one. It's about learning data science, but Python is really it's becoming more and more popular every year. If you look at the surveys that they give to data science professionals, really everybody's into Python. And I think that the steps stay the same. You have to know some computer science fundamentals. You have to grasp end-to-end development. And then when you've picked your language, Python, you can start learning interactively. Of course, you can start by DataCamp, but there are really a lot of other resources out there. So I highly recommend that you, of course, try out the introduction to Python at DataCamp. But then also, if you feel that it isn't working for you, then you should also try to check out some other resources. The end goal is that you keep on learning and that you keep on being busy with Python. So you might not fully understand what the end-to-end development means in this context. But when you're doing data science, you'll also develop applications that have to run maybe each day or each month to get the analytics of a company, for example. Like I worked in telco, and they also had jobs that you had to run or that you had to schedule every so many weeks or on a daily basis. And so data science is not something that when you're working locally, it's very tempting to just see data science as something that you do with files and you run it locally, and that's how it is. But in the bigger context of the business, you also have to understand that it's not something that you do on your own. You rely on teams like data engineers to clean the data for you. Of course, it depends on the definition of a data engineer, but you also rely on other people to do stuff for you. And it's very important to also grasp that aspect of data science. The useful links that I have included here is an article on end-to-end development, the introduction to Python for data science course, and also the fundamentals of computer science course by Coursera. You'll find those very interesting, I'm sure. Although it also depends on your background, I guess. If you have already a degree in computer science, no need to go into the fundamentals of computer science or into the end-to-end development process. But I think if you're a newbie, you can really get all the information, that you need from those courses and articles. Also check out some resources. I recently made a lot of cheat sheets for Python for data science because I really found that it was very hard for all the libraries and how they work, and it really can get quite overwhelming, especially if you don't know anything about Python for data science. And if you're not into the community, it really can be hard to find people to ask questions to or to get reasonable answers from. So that's why I really made those cheat sheets in mind for people that can just use a little bit of help in their learning. And that is, I will also give the PowerPoint to you, and you can. Maybe I'll even include the PDFs with all the information on there. But you can download them for free on the DataCamp website. So if you would ever need a new version, you can always go there. They are posted on the DataCamp community. The next step, also with Python, when you're learning data science for Python, it's very interesting, and it's actually necessary to check out databases. Like I said before, part of doing data science is also working in a business context, and understanding databases is one very essential component that you should try to, like, don't avoid this, because it might be very tempting when you're just working behind your computer to think like, I'll be fine if I just manage to import my text files. But you'll see that when you start working in a company, because that's what it all is about, you know, like you have to be prepared to start working in a company. And in a company, you'll see that they will often work with databases. If you're lucky, they will have something like Cassandra or CouchDB, or like something that is fairly new, I would say. But if you're not so lucky, you'll end up with Oracle, which can be sometimes already a mess if you especially if you come into a company that has been using Oracle for the past 10 years. Your data will get very messy, and it's very important to also keep that in mind for the further process in your learning. Like 80% of your, they usually say that 80% of your time you'll be doing data cleaning and data manipulation, and it's really not a lie. Data management is so important, but it's often overlooked in a lot of companies, I feel. So that is why you as a data scientist should also have a feel for how are databases managed? How can I actually manage them better? Not to give advice, of course, to a database administrator, but you should also have a clue of how they work in order to understand better where your data comes from. And that is exactly why this component is also included. At DataCamp, we have a course on Python and how you can use Python to connect to databases. But this step is more about understanding what is behind the database. How do you get the idea of working with a database? Where do databases come from? In this respect, it's also very important that you learn how to work with SQL, which is a structured query language that you can use to actually query the database for the data that you'll need. And they often say, start with SQL when you're learning data science, but this is definitely not the approach that I and us at DataCamp follow. I mean, it can be easy to start with that, but I would suggest that you start with a programming language. And you might now ask, why would you do that? Well, to be honest, I just think coming from a background where I had no knowledge of programming, it really was a high jump to actually get familiar with how code works and how I can actually learn Python for data science. And you see, like, there are a lot of sites and a lot of, like, Quora, they advise you to do some stuff. But in the end, it's also about what you think is best. If you, on the other hand, think that starting with SQL is best, fine. But I would also, I would see that you also don't skip the coding at all, because that is really fundamental. You can, of course, switch around the steps if you want to a little bit, but in the end, it's all about covering all the material. So you have some links, I mean, some companies and courses mentioned there. And I also have some useful links. You'll see that those links are not included in the infographic, but those are actually links that helped me a lot. You'll see you have an introduction to databases with Stanford University, which is really a good recommendation if you haven't seen anything about databases before. But also the principles of data management, the YouTube series, I really liked it, and it's really down to earth for people that have absolutely no knowledge of how a database works. This is probably one of the best video series that I've seen up until now. And also the book Data Warehouse Systems has really been an eye-opener for me, personally then. Why? Because it really covers everything in a lot of detail, because you have the relational databases and then you move on to having more and more data, and you actually need a data warehouse, and it really covers everything very well, all the architectures that you can have. And I mean, maybe you don't need to go in that much detail, but I am a perfectionist. I like to know a lot of stuff. And especially when you come into a company and you get introduced to their architecture, it can really be overwhelming at first to understand where everything is going and all the databases, what is deprecated, what is still in use, how is it managed, by who is it managed, who do I need to talk to? And it's especially what is behind it can really be clarified by reading or by watching such tutorials. So that is also why, as a data scientist, I would encourage you, I mean, I'm not a data scientist, but if you're really learning data science, I would encourage you to also think about what your life will be in a company, and don't make the mistake of closing yourself off to other things than manipulating data and visualizing it, but also go and look. Don't be afraid of learning something that might be a little bit difficult at first, but just take on the challenge. And you don't need to go and learn everything straight away. It can also just come naturally as your interests evolve, or when you start in a company and you notice that you're really not like up to date with the data warehouse systems, go and read up a bit so that you really get a feel for the company as well. It's very important. Lastly, I also wanted to mention that we're starting an SQL course with Data Camp soon. So if you want to try it out, really stay tuned, I would say. The next step is exploring the data science workflow, and it might come weird at first, I think, if you see this step and you think, well, what does this have to do with data science? I mean, exploring data science workflow. Well, this step is mostly for you to get to know the ecosystem, and especially for Python, I think it's very, very important that you get a feel for what the packages are out there, and also start working with them. So, and there are also a lot of people that don't really know what are the steps of a data science workflow. Recently, there has been a lot of discussion about the data science workflow, especially on the R side. With Hadley Wickham, he and Garrett Grollemont wrote a book, Data Science with R. I'm really forgetting the title at this point, but I'll include it in the PowerPoint, in which they also highlight what the data science workflow looks to for them. And for me, it's a linear, but also a cycle. A linear process, but also a cycle process that repeats itself. So you collect the data, maybe from another department in your business, or maybe from a site, and then you go and explore it. You can use Bokeh or Matplotlib if you're working with Python. And for the collection, it's really important that you get a feel for NumPy and Pandas. I cannot stress enough how important that the basics are. And also here, SciPy and Pandas, they are really the basics. So if you haven't looked into these packages, I would highly recommend that you do so, because learning how to program with Python is one thing, but in the data science workflow, you'll also be making use of a lot of libraries. and learning more about efficient data storage and how to use the most efficient data structures for your programming can also improve you yourself as a data scientist. So don't be afraid to also tackle this. Like I said, I recently made a lot of cheat sheets in order to help people to get quickly moving on into the data science workflow, because when you first start out, it really can feel like such an unmountable task, an impossible task even. And that is why you should try to make it easy on yourself, right? In all this, I want to emphasize that just learning and exploring the data science workflow is one thing, just like learning the basics like stats and math, but really don't forget to apply all of the stuff that you have learned. It's very important to make exercises and to actually get started with Python. You won't become a good Python developer if you don't work on projects, if you don't get in touch with other people, if you don't read others' code. And that is what the next part of this infographic will also emphasize. But enough about that. We'll come to that later. For now, also be sure to check out scikit-learn for machine learning and stats models for statistical modeling. Also reporting with Jupyter Notebook, but also you have other like visualization libraries that can help you to actually report your data effectively. Jupyter in itself helps to make dashboards and PDFs and everything that you need to present the results and the analysis to your employer, for example, or to the business person that has high stakes in what you're doing. But also Matplotlib, which you use inside the Jupyter Notebook, might help. For those who do not know, Jupyter Notebook is basically an interactive data science environment. So you just open it up through your terminal, and then you can get started on doing all kinds of exciting stuff. I use it myself a lot because working in the terminal can be quite frustrating when you first start out, because you have to do, it seems sometimes that you have to do everything very fast. And that is why the Jupyter Notebook can really come in handy, because you have the time to think about what you're doing. If you have already worked with R, it's very similar to RStudio. So then you know more or less how it works. I also put some other companies and tools in here so that maybe if you have already worked in the industry, you have some kind of reference that you can use to map mentally all the tools together. In this stage, I would also like to mention a book that has really helped me. Maybe it's not so much a thing with the data science workflow, but it also has to do with it because it's about continuous integration. I'm not sure how much knowledge you all have on computer science, but continuous integration is basically making sure that the code that you make as a team is qualitative and that you really have a process in place for when you're merging stuff and when you're working together on a code, what structure you should follow and stuff like that. Some might say that it's kind of superfluous because everybody should know how to write good code and how to work in a team. But more often than not, you'll see that it can be a problem and it can be an issue. And especially if you're working with so many libraries, I think it can also it can only benefit you if you're aware of this. And it's also in the much bigger picture of computer science fundamentals and end-to-end development. Continuous integration also makes sure that from end to end your project is really maintained in a certain way, that it really keeps of high quality. And then we come to my experience, big data. I really fell in love with big data when I started working as a big data developer, and I can tell you why. It's just because it's so exciting, because you have so much data, and you'll see that it's also very frustrating, because with big data comes a whole bunch of data management problems, which is also related to the databases. That's probably also why I really dug into that. But big data is different because it has a lot of velocity. You have a lot of streaming data that comes in, and it all needs to be analyzed. The volume, of course, is different, and there is a lot more variety. You can really combine a lot of things, and also, like, you have the IoT, the Internet of Things, which really has a lot of sensors going on, and you register a whole bunch of data that comes from everywhere and nowhere. And this is very interesting to put all of that together and to build applications that can really provide you with a lot of insight. In that aspect, I need to mention also the Hadoop framework. And you have to more see it also in the computer science fundamentals aspect. You have to grasp the distributed approach to data storage and processing, because it's done a little bit differently. And if you really decide to become a big data developer, or if you want to focus on big data analytics, this is one of the things that you should keep in mind. Also, the Spark framework, which is very nice if you're working with big data, can come in handy. And when you're working with Python, it's really easy. It really has a good integration with Spark, even though I would say that working with Scala is a little bit better. But that all depends on what you want to be focusing on. The main thing here is that you should try to focus also on the general picture. The definition of a data scientist isn't all that fixed, and some companies dare to ask for big data experience in their job openings. So you should definitely be aware of big data and what it is. I'm not saying that you have to have a lot of experience with big data, but it can definitely help you to land a job in data science as is. Things that really were very defining in my journey with big data were the introduction to Apache Spark course on edX, and also the follow-up courses in that series. The book Hadoop, the Definitive Guide was also an eye-opener for me, because it really talks about the architecture and what's behind all of Hadoop. It's so big, Hadoop, you cannot even begin to imagine. And this book really tackles it piece by piece, part by part, and you'll really, at the end of the book, you'll really feel that you learned a lot. It really took me a long time to finish it, but I think it's really worth it if you want to deepen yourself in big data. You should definitely take a look. And for those who have a lot of more programming experience and that want to move on from Python, I would suggest programming in Scala, but that is something for those who already have a lot programming experience, because it really builds further on Java concepts, and it can really be hard. I mean, it took me a couple of months to get used to it, and still it's pretty difficult sometimes. So I would only recommend this if you have had some previous programming experience. The sixth step is to grow, connect, and learn. What I already said before is that you really can lose yourself in learning data science and the theory. And I mean, what I just covered, it's a lot to learn. And it will probably, I mean, they usually say that data science is a marathon and not a sprint. And I really agree with this. You should try to also have some fun in between. And that is why I really encourage you to also meet fellow data scientists, for example. You have a lot of good Facebook groups that can help you to connect with your peers. And also Twitter, for example, is a great place to connect to people. LinkedIn can also be great, but there the LinkedIn groups, it works a little bit differently. So the barrier might be, the entry level might be a little bit too high. Not because you know enough, but because it's just scary. I mean, for me personally, it's scary connecting with people that really, I mean, have a lot of experience and that have written entire packages. I usually try to keep it low scale. I go to meetup groups, meetup events, and I try to connect with data science enthusiasts there. Also giving speeches, for example, if you're really a social person, it can help you to connect, because your network is one of the most important things when you start in data science. You might not expect it, but it can really be hard getting a data science job. And when you have a network in place and people know that you're looking for a job and they know what you've been doing, it will get easier to get in touch with the right people. Besides that, I would encourage you to join in competitions, or when you're just starting out with Python, it's already hard enough. Try to do just some challenges. Kaggle also offers challenges, and you can just download the data set, explore it yourself, see what comes out, and also interact with others that have the same problems as you. You can ask questions to others' code, which is also important to do. And it's really a nice way. I personally like Kaggle a lot because also the entry barrier is so low that you can just go and ask people questions about their code, how they approached stuff, how they approached the data science problem, and then just learn from that also. The third thing is have a pet project. I know that these things really sound easy for me to say, but having a pet project is one of the things that will make you learn stuff. Let me just give you an example. When you have to work with the Python library matplotlib, you'll see that you have a lot of code to actually make a plot. And at first you'll think, oh my God, how am I going to get the result that I want from all of this code, and where should I start? Well, having a pet project is one of the ways that you can actually focus on just one data set, and then everything else will come. Also, when you take on a pet project, just make sure that you take a data set that speaks to you, of which you know something. For example, I like data sets that talk about movies. You have a movie data set from IMDb on Kaggle. That really is a very nice way to get in touch with data science, but also with your other hobbies. If you like to watch movies, for example, or if you're interested in what the internet leaks were in the past years, just look up a data set from there and with that topic, and you can just start off from there. Also, when you have a pet project, it will help you to develop your intuition. You have seen that there are a lot of steps that require you to learn a lot of stuff and to apply a lot of stuff, but that doesn't mean that you'll develop an intuition for data science problems. This is mostly something that you'll learn once you start working with a real life data set. I mentioned that you have Kaggle and also driven data for projects, but remember that also here you don't need to start from scratch. You have, for example, DataCamp offers tutorials, free tutorials that help you step by step to take on the challenge and to really get started with data sets, real life data sets. And I would really highly encourage you to take this course if you are if you're just insecure about your skills, to start with these tutorials, because these sites are really practical ways to learn Python by doing, to actually get practice with Python. And it might sometimes be hard to really get started on Kaggle because you really don't know if you're up to the challenge. And that's why I would really, I really think these courses are amazing. Also, a new site that I saw recently is data.world. You can post your own data sets to it, but you can also use it as a tool to find data sets. If you are in desperate need for a good data set, I would recommend that you go there. And maybe also very important to keep in mind is that if you don't have a GitHub account yet, make sure to make one and also follow the tutorial. because growing and connecting and learning is also about connecting with the business side of data science. And GitHub is a very important, I mean, just version control in general is a very important thing that you should keep in mind. It's part of the continuous integration that I talked about earlier. And it's also part of getting in touch with other people's code. So I would definitely recommend that you do that. And then we're almost there, people. You have the 7th step, which is immerse yourself completely. And these ones are really aimed to the business side. You have the internship, the bootcamp, and the job. Now, the job is very advanced, and the companies that are listed there, they might seem unreachable, but the point that I try to make here is that you can really get there. You just have to go through all of these steps and really make sure that your network is in place, that you have all the knowledge that it takes. But it can require some steps. Maybe you also have to apply for a job that is not really a data science position, but rather a data analyst position, and then you can evolve towards there. It's all about getting there. Just don't be discouraged if you, for example, first have to do an internship to get a job, because an internship is also a way to learn. And again, the companies that are listed here, they might seem big and unreachable, but there are other sites. Like if you look on LinkedIn, you also have a lot of companies that offer job positions as interns. Or if you go on AngelList, they have startups that are looking for data scientists. And I think that is one of the ways to really get into the data science industry, besides connecting and making sure that your network is in place, and also making sure that you connect with other people. And then you see also boot camps. Learning by doing is maybe also going to a boot camp, even though like it might not seem like it might seem like a very expensive solution to do, but I wouldn't discourage you from doing it, because especially if you're already working, it might be difficult to find time to immerse yourself completely. And that is where the boot camps really can come in handy. And yeah, just make sure that you pick the right boot camp for you, I would say, because you have a lot of options out there. And you also have a lot of free resources. Excuse me, could you mute your microphone? Because I'm really hearing a lot of noise. I don't know. Okay. So then, as I said, you have a couple of useful links, but the most important link is probably your network. It sounds very cheesy, but it is like that. And then lastly, engage with the community. You're here in a call with me, so I'm guessing that you're already pretty engaged with the community, but don't hold back. Give something back to the community that helps you. For example, contribute by starting a blog or becoming a guest contributor. DataCamp, by the way, is always looking for guest contributors. So if you really feel like sharing a project with us, and with the rest of the DataCamp community, feel free to get in touch with me. But besides that, it's also about staying up to date with the latest news, especially in artificial intelligence and in machine learning. There are a lot of new developments, and I think it can only be useful if you also, get on sites like DataTow or Hacker News, or even just Twitter, to really see what the most influential people in the data science industry are up to. And it can really help you to get a better idea of what you also need to be focusing on. For example, recently, a lot of people have been busy with deep learning. And if you see that a lot of people are talking about it, and really that research is advancing, and that it might also be something that you are interested in, just try it out, go and see what it's about, and also try to just know what you're talking about when you start with such a new topic. Also, you see the logo of Stack Overflow. I think that I can speak for everybody when I say that I spend a lot of time on Stack Overflow looking for the right answers. And also for data science, it's a really, really good resource. for if you have any questions, because you'll be very certain about having an answer. I also see a lot of people asking questions on Quora. So yeah, if you have a question, just ask it. Don't be afraid to ask something, even though the answer might not always be as friendly. You can always ask, and I think there's always a place to learn, especially when you're starting off with Python. It can already be hard enough. Just don't hold back with your questions. And then, yeah, also the communities. I talked about meetup groups. I talked about Facebook. I think it's also important, for example, to join communities such as the DataCamp community in discussing the content that is being put out there. For example, if you see my cheat sheet and you feel that something is missing or something is wrong, there is always time to discuss these things. And I feel that, yeah, you should also be a part of the discussion that is going on in data science education. Just like being part of the latest news is something that you really need to consider. You can also follow the key players in the industry. I think I'm really following a lot of people, but I think I have written an article about the key players in the industry. So I'll also make sure to include this in the PowerPoint, because there are really quite a lot. I think that the key to it is just also figuring out how the network works, just like with Facebook, and you see a friend of a friend that you think you also know. Well, on Twitter, it's mostly the same. You follow one person and then you see another person that is putting out a lot of interesting content, and you just follow him or her. Of course, for Python developers, I must say that, well, of course, Guido van Rossum is one of the people that you should definitely follow. And for Python specifically, you have Andreas Muller, which is also a very important person, or Jake van der Plas. Once again, I'll make sure to include all of their names and Twitter handles in the PowerPoint. So yeah, you see all the sites that I talked about with links. I'm not sure if anybody's active on Reddit already, but I also feel that it's a really great way to get in touch with other people that are learning data science and to get good recommendations of what you should be focusing on. And then I have run through all of my steps. I thank you very much for listening to me. And if you want to connect on Twitter, make sure to do so. And right now I can take some questions if you want. I'm not sure where I'll first see you. Okay, so do you guys have any questions? I'm here in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and start asking questions. Nobody? Maybe somebody can tell me what you have already been doing with data science, what you have already learned and focused on in your journey with Python. Feel free to just unmute yourself and share some story with me. Okay, I see. Start using Python for machine learning use cases. Okay. Yeah, that's really nice. Have you already looked into scikit-learn? Okay, so you've already used SVM. So you already know how to use scikit-learn. That's really amazing. So did you also, before you start implementing, did you also look at some theory, or what was your education, your previous background? It's really interesting that you mentioned that you're building something like directing a ticket to the right user group in your organization, because that is really the business case for machine learning. You have a master's in computer science, which is probably the best education that you could have had to start machine learning. That's really amazing. And then did you already knew Python before you started working at your organization? So you already knew how to, okay. So then I guess that working with Python, I mean, working with programming language is not something that you hold back from. Oh, great. You worked with Spark. That's really amazing. I'm really a big fan of Spark. Did you also look into in Scala? Because I would really recommend this if you have a master's in computer science and you worked with Spark, and you also want to move on to big data. I think Scala is one of the most amazing things. Proof of concepts in Scala and Python. Wow. What are you still doing in this call? You're really amazing. Wow. So what are your next plans when it comes to data science and Python? Did you get any ideas, or do you have any ideas what you'll be working on? It's really such a big field that it can really, I mean, you can really get lost in data science, I feel. Okay, right now busy with office work. Yeah, that's the real life of a data scientist. Yeah, no, I mean, it can really get very frustrating if you think about it, because when I first started out, I thought data science is such an interesting field and you'll spend your time just building applications to get analytics and insights to the big crowds. But in the end, it's also a lot of office work, getting the data management right, documenting your code, getting in touch with the right people to get your data, having a lot of meetings about that. It can really get very frustrating, to the point where you actually feel that you're no longer doing data science work. Yes, true. Okay, I'm glad that somebody agrees with me, because I really can't hear anybody else, but I mean, that's my personal perspective. I really love data science, because the time that I do work on data and getting projects out there and writing my blogs, I really feel like it's something that you have to be doing if you're interested in data and in getting analysis out of your data. If you see also now what they're doing with Internet of Things, I think it can only get more interesting for us as data scientists, to see how you can really connect all of that. And I think Python, I really am dying to experiment also with Raspberry Pi. It might not, I mean, it's definitely something a little bit more advanced, I feel, but I'm really interested to get started with that. I'm not sure if you have any experience with that. If so, if you have any experience, feel free to connect with me and guide me through it, because I think it can be very challenging, just like data science. You're a web developer and learning Python and data science. Wow, Hugo, that's really great news. I really did an article recently on actually switching from web development to learning Python for data science. I don't know if you've seen it, but I'm really excited to actually meet somebody that is going through the transition, or like you're just adding data science to your skill set, which is really amazing. Yes, I totally agree with you. You shouldn't really focus on Scala at this point. But I do feel that you're really off to a great start with your personal projects. I also think that it could be interesting to combine your experience as a web development with Python for data science, with the data-driven designs that are out there. And you see, data science is really getting also a hold in the web development community. And I think it's just really interesting to see how people are making the transition. So if you have any personal insights on your transition to Python for data science, please feel free to connect with me and to update me about it. Because you see, data science, I started out from literature and linguistics, and I also had to go through the transition, and I'm really interested. You see a lot of people that come from meteorology and physics and all these type of fields. You also have a master's in computer science. You have a lot of people that come together on just one topic, and that's data and how to derive insights from the data. And just like web developers also need to be aware of what is going on with data science to also make their designs and to get up with the industry, what is happening out of there. Everybody just needs to be aware of data and the importance of data. So I'm really excited that you shared this experience with us, Hugo. Really excited. Like I said, it's really awesome that so many people are working on getting involved with data science, and especially for Python. I think it's really so awesome also that the Python community has found a way to also bridge a bit the gap that has been going on. You had Python for web development, and then you have Python, like Pythonistas that use Python for scientific purposes. And the two of them, they seemed quite apart for quite a while, but now I feel that it's really, as a community, Python is only getting stronger. And it's really great to see also real Pythonistas making the change. I'm really excited to hear your stories. If you have any questions about learning Python for data science, if you want to get in touch about the material that I have written, please make sure to do so. You can always connect with me on Twitter. My name is Karlijn Willems. And you can also contact me through the DataCamp email address. Yeah, I just feel very lucky to have had this presentation to you. And yeah, feel free to get in touch with me if you have any more questions.